Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Florida After School for part of our online learning series. I'm really excited to welcome today our guest speaker, Bhumi Esho. She is a family engagement advisor that we met through our work with Million Girls Moonshot and the STEM Next Development Fund. She is also part of a leadership team for a foundation known as Endless OS that we might not talk about today or we might be able to get to, but I just had a very enchanting conversation with her regarding this concept of access and even how that's related to family engagement. So she brings a wealth of experience to this space and is part of leading the strategy for building national partnerships with TechBridge Girls and just an amazing STEM graduate herself. A little bit more about her background before being involved with TechBridge and STEM Next and now her own consulting firm. She actually lived in Southeast Asia, leading education programs and managing teams with local nonprofits, schools, and the first and only science center in Cambodia. It's called Kids City Asia. She just brings a ton of leadership experience to the table. She's an active philanthropic leader and involved with her community. And we are just so blessed to not only have her here with us today virtually, but have her participate in our previous conference, and fingers crossed, hopefully in our upcoming conference, which I'll give a shameless plug for to save the date, October 1st through the 4th. With that, I'd like to invite her up to the stage and invite everyone to just engage as we go. And I'll turn it over to you, Bhumi.
Thank you so much, Holly. And it's great to see you all. And thanks for sharing the screen. So we're going to be going through, we have only an hour, probably a little less than an hour, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to family engagement. Got this conversation going. But what I wanted to do today is really kind of just share some highlights, get y'all engaged and active in brainstorming what family engagement looks like, and share resources with you as well. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to do a quick intro. Y'all have already kind of heard like my professional bio. One thing that I always like to do when I do an intro is to kind of talk about my family engagement experience. And so for me, I've been involved in family engagement for many years, mainly because I had these fond memories of myself, particularly with my mom, when it came to baking and cooking. I am first generation, and I had Nigerian American. I had the opportunity I was born in the US, but lived in Nigeria. And some of the fun things that we did was we would cook together. And that led me into kind of thinking the chemistry around things, particularly when you're baking. And my mom would say, back in the day before we would go in and use like the mixer, electric mixer, we would mix the sugar and the butter by hand. And that really got me to think around chemistry. And so I share this experience because that family involvement, engagement, participation is where we can really encourage ourselves or families and think even around our lived experiences when it comes to STEM. So with that in mind, I already had shared in chat for you to kind of just think about your role in family engagement, where you are thus far. I shared a word cloud that I'd want to, create. So if you haven't already, I'd love for you to kind of click through that. And I will go real quick to the next slide to just talk about how we're going to organize today's conversation. And I think, Holly, kind of for your reference, I believe at the bottom of your seat, you'll see numbers. If you just kind of hover over it, yeah, and then you'll be able to click through if you want to. That might be an easier way. So really quickly, I wanted to just kind of talk about what I'd love to do. Want to get to know all of y'all. Want to talk about why family engagement, because I think that that's something that a lot of times we feel we struggle with, particularly talking with funders and so forth, and even the programs that we work with, the agencies that we work with, why this is important. And then I want to really kind of delve into how you can do this. And this is why we're having this conversation, is because there's tools out there that have really been developed, evidence-based, can resource tools for you. And then you'll have an opportunity to really just delve in and brainstorm so you can start applying this almost immediately. And then we'll wrap up the session. And so if we start off by just getting to know where our journey is and getting to know each other a little bit. If you haven't already, please delve into the word cloud and share. And I'm just pulling it up right now also to just see where people are at. So it looks like I have 9 people so far who've shared. That's all of us, and that is fantastic. I'm going to very quickly pull it up for folks to see.
Should I stop sharing mine so you can share yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. So it looks like we have folks who are, when they think of their family engagement journey so far, specific, interesting, connection. I love that that had been talked about, because that is something we'll talk about with the care framework. Hands-on, also very important. Inclusive, another key word that we will, be talking about as well. I would for many of us is that it is inconsistent. Sometimes we do that one-time thing and then we step back. And also the reality is that it can be disorganized as well because of that inconsistency, where you just are like, I need to do it, let me insert that, and you're trying to kind of get, those ideas in play. And being open-minded is another key component there. So I had everyone do this really, and you can continue to share this, and we'll have the final version that I can definitely share with you at the end. But I wanted you to do this activity to just get a sense of where we're all at when we think about family engagement, because all of us are at different points. We don't have to be at the same point. It really is about where you're ready to start, where your families are at, and where you as your teams are at as well. So when we get into the power of family engagement, for those who are still kind of struggling around that idea, the reality is, for all of us who run nonprofits, who run any educational service especially, our capacity is limited. So the power of family engagement is the fact that you're really going with, you're getting the support from caregivers who are the first teachers of the students that you're working with, of the learners that you're working with. So there's a value, there's importance, and you already have strong cheerleaders because they want what's good for their child. And so that is, really valuable to be able to have that, especially when you think of limited capacity. We go to this next slide. Important, aspect too is us thinking around the equity and inclusion that needs to exist there. And this really happens through listening to families. This particular photo is really special because it comes from the California School for the Blind. The girl who's in that photo is actually dissecting a cow's eye, and she's blind. So there's a power to that, to say that she's doing science, she's learning, despite all that we might kind of, think about. We would probably might never even really think of engaging those who are visually impaired in an activity like this. But here it is with her family, with caregivers supporting her in this, action. And so one, important piece about this is that a lot of times the families who tend to be left out are the ones that we really need to prioritize when it comes to family engagement, and they're going to build that foundation that's strong for everyone. Next slide. And so to do that, we really need to center the training and how we train. We really need to kind of listen and learn about the various best practices. So just like family engagement isn't that one-time event, the training and the professional development cannot be a one-time event as well. It needs to be something that's continuous and sustainable. And it needs to be something, it doesn't have to be so heavy or so, done. It can be done in spurts. It can be done in very, reflective, interpersonal, and very relevant ways for the staff as well as for families. Next slide. And so to really kind of like segue, how do you do that? For those of you who are probably thinking, it's like, I don't have that training. I don't have the resources. The STEM family engagement planning tool was created 3 years ago because of that need. There really had been this, conversation of how do we truly engage families, and where's the evidence base to be able to know that we're doing this the right way. And so ISRI, the Institute for the Institute on the Resilience of Youth, really kind of stepped back, did a literature review with Karen Mapp, who is one of the experts when it comes to family engagement from Harvard, along with a lot of other groups of experts, and started evaluating what are the best ways to have equitable family engagement. And so through that lens, if we go to the next slide, we started studies all around the country, really working with communities, rural communities, grand families, communities that support grandparents who are the caregivers when it comes to families, urban communities, particularly communities too that support low socioeconomic families, as well as just all the different diverse communities that really that we really wanted to be able to ensure that we uplifted and supported. And we found that the framework, the tool that I'll introduce in the next slide, really is true for all the different diverse communities. It all just depends on how you're bringing the different pieces into play. But that idea of a care framework is important. So over the years, we started with that literature review that I said. In 2021, we refined it, and actually now there is a planning tool, which is going to be listed as one of the resources that you can go back to and kind of learn from. And then just last year, we wrapped up, and Israel in particular, wrapped up an evaluation of 9 different communities from California to West Virginia, that were doing different programs in family engagement. So if we, so for this particular slide that I wanted to highlight, this just showcases the different partners that were spotlighted for this. And I'll go in depth into 2 of them, or actually one of them, which is in San Diego, that talked about how they're doing, as well as other examples of how family engagement have been applied. So you get to also, in terms of resources, see the different spotlights. So this whole webinar really allows you to just have the different resources and learn about the best practices that exist. So whether it is in Nebraska, particularly in Crete, Nebraska, where they have Karen and Hmong families, as well as even in Richmond, Virginia, where I'm at, where they particularly went to public housing to work around family engagement, to San Diego, where they looked to going into the actual communities and going to where families gather. All of these different examples, while they were using the planning tool, they all realized just increased family engagement. Next slide. So I kind of, talked about the different examples, and I really wanted to emphasize what the care framework is. So when we think about the care framework, there are 4 components to it. And it's just a nice acronym of we care, right? And so connecting really is this idea of how do you invite families in? How do they have a sense of belonging? And we'll talk a little bit about more. I would love to kind of hear your brainstorming as you go into your sessions to have those conversations. But what really is important here that you want to tease out is this idea that when you're bringing in families and connecting with families, are you using resources that really speak to them? For many families, and I think of immigrant families because, especially with my lived experiences, WhatsApp is a great means of communicating. Are you emailing them, or are you connecting with them and texting them through WhatsApp? What language are you using? Is everything in standard English, or are we thinking around translating whatever flyers that we're sharing? Those are important, pieces there. When it comes to ACT, many parents, and there are examples that we have out on the ground where parents already kind of feel like they are not a STEM expert. Staff feel like they're not a STEM expert. So how in the world are we going to go in and start, talking about STEM? But the reality is that STEM is everywhere. And just like the example that I shared about myself and cooking is a form of doing science. It's chemistry. So being able to kind of think about what types of hands-on activities are we doing that are culturally relevant. A great example that has happened with the New York Hall of Science is they were going to go in and do this family night where they were thinking of 3D printers and, all these other things. And then they said, wait a minute. We are really bringing in the community it's a Latinx community. And instead of using these fancy tools that aren't something that they have at home, why don't we use something that is available at home? So they changed it up and used a tortilla maker. And the tortilla maker is something where all the families were like, oh, I know how to use this. And so they started doing this, and they were able to kind of make images and all that on the tortilla. And then they were able to have tacos. They turned it into a taco party. So it really became really relevant, for all the families and something that they can truly take home. So let's also not kind of think about everything has to be in this one big, location that feels far away and removed, but how do we bring that home? And then the idea too, that's really important is the reflection piece. Like, how do we sit and make meaning for ourselves so that we continuously learn, but also for the families. So they're coming in and thinking about, oh, wow, okay, so my child has done this. How can I kind of take this home and also learn about it? So especially if you bring families together and they're doing, an activity, is there an opportunity for them to continue to evaluate what the impact of this activity at the location as well, versus having, to kind of go home and then complete a survey? How can you make doing that data collection fun and relevant for them, as well? And then the kind of final piece is just this idea of then how do you take it to the next level and empower families so that they can truly be the agents of change for their young learners, so that they can even see like how, when it comes to careers and relevant and all that, like how that can shape and impact themselves and their learners, and truly support their learners, bringing that voice, not just for the caregivers, but also for the youth. And one thing before we go off to the next slide, I really want to emphasize that this connect, act, reflect, empower, you don't have to kind of follow suit and say, I must start with connect. Sometimes you're at a point where you really need to get into the reflection, and the reflection can kind of go in and help you better connect with families. So being able to think about where you're at when you're having these conversations, to be able to support and elevate what you're doing in family engagement. So this leads into an example, and I mentioned before already, Challenge Island in San Diego. They're one of the 9 spotlights. I've connect and reflect together, because the reality is that for a lot of times you're not going to just say, I'm just going to do something and connect. A lot of times you are pairing the pieces of the framework together. So just kind of thinking about that as you're doing. This example is really cool, because one, particularly when it came to the connection part, Challenge Island had started doing their program before COVID had happened, before the COVID pandemic had started. And they were already doing some things that were virtual, just because when it came to access and families being able to get to the location, it wasn't always easy. And so when they started doing that, and then COVID happened, and then it really was something where they had to kind of really focus on doing things virtually, they actually saw a huge uptick on engagement during that time. They continued doing that and said, okay, let's now, as the COVID started dissipating and we weren't in that kind of pandemic level anymore, they said, let's take advantage of this uptick. What can we do to continue to increase engagement? And so in addition to doing, sorry, in addition to doing,
email on that.
yeah, if someone could mute themselves.
She is
So in addition to kind of just continuing that engagement, they also were very reflective around where were families meeting? How do we reduce the burden of actually connecting with them? So they started meeting them where they usually go. So they were going to the churches or the places of worship. They were going to libraries. And that I think is an untapped resource a lot of times, just being able to go to libraries. A lot of families go there and there's access to internet and like all of these different resources. So it's a kind of great way to be able to meet. And it's local, it's a lot of times within walking distance. So it's an opportunity to be able to really kind of connect there. And then another piece that they really wanted to do was how do they really engage their their youth to really have more that of a connection with their families, their caregivers, their aunts and uncles as well. And so they partnered with Girl Scouts and the curriculum that they have around STEM career exploration and used also the if-then resources because they were really kind of focusing too around girls in STEM. And we're able to create this opportunity for girls to interview their families around STEM careers, to kind of talk about and share the different types of careers that are out there, and to start kind of creating a vision board of who they want to be, the girls. And that was done in collaboration with their families. And so that really allowed the opportunity for families to reflect too on what it means to be STEM, who are the role models that exist locally and nationally, and what it means to kind of have that like career. The next slide. Um, in this next slide, the conversation kind of shifts into act and empower. And this example is not one of the partners that we have worked with. This actually comes from literature. So this is from research. And what I really like about this example is it's really emphasizes math and math's role in STEM. And we don't really talk about math so much. It always is about science, engineering, tech, especially. But there's a power too in math and how math too is every day. And so what's really neat about this opportunity is that in addition to having this in addition math club, which really can focus on upper elementary students in New York City, in one of the most diverse communities in the nation. It was an opportunity for the kids to be in this after club and really kind of reflect on how math impacts every day and ask questions. It wasn't about let's do multiplication table and what you kind of think about with math, but it actually was what are some interesting questions that you have, especially even around nature. And this was taken alongside parents where they had retreat days where they would come together and they would first do activities using math, geometry, kind of creating shapes and all of that, towers, paper towers and things. And then they would go and take a walk around the city and start looking around and comparing the structures they made alongside the architecture that existed when it came to math. And it really kind of got them to reflect and kind of think too about how math is every day, how it can be thought of, how you can kind of talk through it in day by day. And some of the even fun things too that they did were they measured the circumference of trees which you know, don't think about it. It's a very easy thing. You don't really need too much except for that like tape measure to be able to do that. Um, but what that shifted for the families, particularly for the caregivers, is they would have bi-monthly meetings where they would come together, look through their kids' journal, talk about, analyze that, and talk about like the math and the learning. And then as they saw the impact of this after school club with their kids, they started advocating for their children when it came to doing more of this and less on that standardized, the actual testing or the prepping for the standardized test, because they saw how overwhelming it was, and they advocated to really kind of focus to do less of that so their kids could really see the impact of math and that everydayness. So it really gave voice for the families. So I shared these slides so that we can really kind of jump in and brainstorm. So I'm going to give you 20 minutes to reflect on your experiences. The Jamboard, that's going to be something that I will share very quickly with you. That, pulling it up right now. And so in this Jamboard, there are 2 pages to it. There is and I can, yeah, perfect. Thanks, Holly. And so there are 2 pages. There's the first page, really and if you can maybe do a reaction of a thumb reaction of up if you have used Jamboard or not. If people, okay, so I do see some thumbs up. Thumbs down if you have not. Okay, okay, great. So there are a few people who have not. And so very quickly, when you click on that link that I've shared, Holly, since you are actually, I could share it real quick because I wanted to just show how to use it. We're going to use the sticky notes, so I can very quickly, I will share my screen so I can show you how it's done.
Perfect.
Okay. So very quickly, there are 2 pages to this. So all you need to do is go up to where it says expand frame bar, just hover over it, you'll see that. Click on that and you can go to the second document. And so I want you to, and you can choose connect and reflect or acting in power. You have, you know, enough time to really kind of look at both. And so in your groups, in your smaller groups, we're going to break out into breakout sessions. You'll have a conversation, you know, around this. You can answer the questions of like, how have you helped programs engage children and parents in terms of acting or in terms of empowerment? Think to choose one person who will report and spend about 30 seconds to highlight one thing that you talked about. And so when you want to just start jotting down ideas, you go to the left side, click on the sticky note, and then you can start adding in the points. So I can say, oh, I will just put in this nature walks. So I've typed that in, hit save, and you hit cancel if you're done kind of time, because you can just continue to do sticky note after sticky note if you want. But then and you can move it around really easily. So we will, with that said, I'll stop sharing so I can see everyone. If no one has any questions, we will break you out into breakout rooms to do this. And I'll give you, actually, I'm changing my mind. I'll give you 15 minutes to do this.
How many people do you want per room?
We have,
You want 3 or 4? Or
yeah, 3. Let's do, yeah, 3 or 4. So 3, that if we did 3, I think that's 11 people.
all right. So give me just 1 second. They're going to be kind of at random, everyone.
Yeah.
And in just a moment, you will receive an invitation to participate. Two groups are going to have 4, and one group will have 3.
Sounds good.
Okay. Options. Uh-oh, where's my last one? There we go. Oh, no, it looks like everyone will have 4. There we go. Oh,
Minus me?
correct. So
Yes.
in just a moment, a blue button should pop up on your screen to invite you to join a room. And you will just go over into your rooms, making sure that you have that link available to you. And you'll go into your rooms. And if you're in your room and you need some assistance, there's a way to call for help. But down at that, so I see some people have moved. They're
Yes.
starting to get it. There we go. I see. Chuck, do you see your button down at the bottom? Hopefully. Deborah and Sophia, do you guys need any help? Rachel, Delmas, do you guys need help getting into your room? They're getting it. They're getting it. Wonderful. I'm going to press pause on the recording right now since we don't need to record, just silence. Hi guys, welcome back. Hi Boomy, I hope that was okay and that I did what you wanted me to do.
No, that was perfect. Perfect.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. One of our friends, Deborah, she's actually on the phone listening, so she was not able to join in, but she is still with us and she is still listening. So hopefully this last few minutes will get everyone feeling good. And I think everyone is almost back. 3, 2, 1, there we go. And if you want to share your screen to walk them through, feel free to do so.
Awesome. So I was able to pop in to everyone's session, everyone's breakout room to kind of just hear what you were saying, and at least saying that you were all set up. And kind of the last one, I was actively involved in the conversation a little bit. But what I want to do, we have 4 minutes left. I want to really be able to kind of wrap up our conversation. So I hope you have your reporter, each group to give a 30-second highlight of, so you don't need to cover everything. There's a lot that is on this Jamboard, which I can actually share with you at the end of this. But I wanted kind of the groups to go. And so I will step back and let, who wants to go first? I can start calling people in the different groups, but I figured you can jump in.
Look at Chuck, he's stepping forward. Let's go.
I don't mind, I'll go first. We're going to answer the fourth question on the Acting and Empowering page, talking about how do we make our parents and caregivers advocates in the learning process. And we talked about sort of educating parents and encouraging them to use language around having a growth mindset. So, when their kids get discouraged or if they don't get it right the first time, or even if there's something they don't like, or saying things like, I don't like math or I'm not good at math, making sure parents are kind of supporting that the idea that, you can get there, let's try again, let's look at it a different way. And not just, allowing their kids to be defeated.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much, Chuck. And there's a lot I can say about the whole, I've had a lot of caregivers say that. It's like, well, he doesn't like math. I didn't like it either. I'm like, no.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Next group. Real quick. Chuck set the standard, so definitely just a nice 30 seconds.
My group talked about connecting and reflecting. And we were just kind of like talking about reflecting on the specific needs of the families and how, what is preventing them from coming, whether or not it's they can't have childcare, they don't have time, they're not engaged. So really trying to find connecting ways of having the kids come and participate, whether or not it's like art walks or visual schedules or anything like that. And some of the issues that we've come across as well are like language barriers, and trying to find ways of communicating with families, but also grants, being very strict from the government, telling us what our specific rules are and trying to work around that. So
great. Thanks, Rachel. Then the final group. Who's stepping up for that?
So this is Patricia, and I came on late to the webinar, but I went right into the breakout room, and we discussed family nights and some of the things that I actually do and virtually with the families, so they get an idea of what the kids are doing in their after school programs. I do it in a larger scale and invite families. So we do virtual events together, and I provide the material so that the families could actually experience STEAM and just some fun activities. And there is something that I'm doing tonight. So that's why I'm not on camera. I'm in transit. So, but then I also shared there was through University of Florida, UF, that we do something called Meet a Scientist. And those are virtual sessions just for 30 minutes that the kids, whether they're in after school programs or if they log in from home with a family member or an adult family member, they can learn a little bit of science. It's live and it's with any of the UF scientists from their universities.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patricia. And I know we are right at time. What I'd like to do to just kind of wrap up is to note that we do, like I'd mentioned, we have resources that are available. So there will be our slide deck that, and I will just show that really quickly. That actually has a link to different resources that you can use when it comes to family engagement. And as that final just reminder is, when you're thinking about family engagement, let's go beyond STEM events, listening and learning with families, thinking about the resources that connect to practice. You have the planning tool for that. And being able to really think about how you're going to embed family engagement into your organization's work. We had conversations where we're talking about doing family engagement as its like own event. And, I had that question is like, can that be embedded to what's already happening if there's already a conflict? So really just being able to do that. And there's also a link to the STEM Next Family Engagement Project website for more info. So that's all the information that you have. Just wanted to kind of make sure that you have that. I will send an email with the PDF link to Holly so you can have that, as well as the Jamboard, so you can have that as reference as well.
Perfect. Thank you
you.
so much, Boomy. We really appreciate you joining us and everyone who took the time to be with us today. I'll give a quick shout out that we have actually developed a STEM peer learning community. And that peer learning community is actually led by one of our teammates, Shelby Norwood, or facilitated by her. And so you're going to start seeing a more and more specific stuff coming out. I know that family engagement is one of those topics emerging from that peer learning community. If you'd like to learn more about that, drop us an email at info@fl afterschool.com, and we'd love to hear from you. There's also just dropped in the chat a link to just give us feedback so we can do our own reflecting based on your practice today. So thank you guys for being with us, and a link will be shared with everyone who registered today along with those materials that Boomy will share. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye now.